From the studios of Cue Ball Media in New York, this is the Create Your New Normal podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, and I will interview and share stories of people who have successfully reinvented themselves. They'll talk about the obstacles and challenges they faced and overcame to create their new normal. We'll look at what they did, how they did it, why they did it, and I know it will inspire you to get you from your A, where you are now, to your B, where you want to be. So are you ready to create your new normal? Well, let's get it. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, and this is episode number 4. And I'm excited to introduce to you my guest. My guest has reinvented himself at least 4 times, and he's about to do it again. So that should be inspiring to all of you who are listening. He started at Columbia Records during hip-hop's rise to global power, shaping campaigns for Lauryn Hill, Nas, the Fijis, and Destiny's Child. Then he pivoted before most people had email, launching one of the internet's first culture newsletters. Then to social, running real-time campaigns for Nike, CNN, and Beats by Dre, including a London Olympics moment that generated over $50 million in earned media. He was an early angel investor in Clubhouse and built a 2.5 million member community there before anyone called it a trend. Now he's doing it in AI, and he advised the team behind BBL Drizzy, the first AI-generated track sampled by Drake. And today he lives between Bangkok, Dubai, and Johannesburg, building at the intersection of capital, culture, and AI, and writing a book about exactly what the audience is here for, to help how to create the next chapter instead of waiting for the old one to end. So that is an impressive resume. So I introduce to you my guest, James Andrews. James, welcome to Create Your New Normal.
Oh, thank you for having me, Anthony. That bio sounds incredible. It's so well done that it impressed me. I sometimes I forget at the journey, and one of the things I've been doing today, as a matter of fact, is the power of reminiscing. I work so hard. Sometimes it's only when I do these interviews that I actually stop and sort of take account of what my career has done. I think it's just an important practice for all those who are in the pivot, who are thinking about what's next, is to go back in the archives, check the receipts, and never forget where you came from.
Yeah, it's great. And yes, your resume is inspiring. I've followed you for a while, and I believe we crossed paths at an event, a few years ago. I'm not quite sure, but definitely been a fan. And you wrote an article, which is really what inspired me to have you on the show. You wrote a great article. All of you should read it. It's on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can listen to the recording and get the title again, so you don't have to write it down. But the title is Your Layoff Won't Be in a Meeting. It'll be a calendar invite. Build your gateway vehicle now. And that's very important today because we know all about layoffs. Layoffs have been around for a while, for a long time. But, before the 1990s, I think the 1990s is when layoffs really started to become a thing. And in the 1990s, before then, layoffs were kind of like evil. They were kind of like immoral. It was one of the things that nobody wanted to do. And if you laid somebody off, it was almost like you had to come up with a good reason for it. Okay, and not a lie, but, you really had to, make the person feel, not okay, but there was just much more of a human element to it. But, starting in the 90s, it was like, it's Wall Street, baby, gotta go. We gotta get to the bottom line. We gotta cut payroll. We gotta make Wall Street feel good about our company. And so that's when it really all started, and it's continued, and it's gotten even worse. And you talked a lot about that in this article. And again, this is one of the best articles I've ever read on the internet, on LinkedIn. And, we know all about the AI-generated slop on LinkedIn. So I'm definitely not telling you this because you're on my show. I definitely mean that. It was a great article and talked about the difference between layoffs in the 90s and layoffs in the 2000s and now the 2020s. So, why don't you talk a little bit about the difference between layoffs then and layoffs now?
Well, I'm no expert on layoffs, but I have been laid off. Um,
Yeah.
and so I can only speak from my lived experience, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and, um, there was a time when I, decided to enter into the record business that working for Sony Music was like working for a machine. It was
Mm-hmm.
like working for, the New York Yankees. Um, we, you know, took young artists and made them superstars, and they became, the Fugees, Lauryn Hill, Maxwell, Nas, Kenny Lattimore, on and on, on and on. And um, back then, the way that you know, you would even get a job in the record business was really based on um, relationships. I mean, it sort of in the industry that I decided to go into, even though I went to UCLA. It's not an industry that you necessarily had to have a Harvard degree or have pedigree. In fact, in many cases, that pedigree slowed you down. Um, so I got to know early the power of social capital and relationships and in internal relationships. A lot of my time in the Sony system was managing both the work, but then the politics of um, the dynamics of the record business, which were highly political, right?
Mm-hmm.
And built on relationships. And um, I think I was able to do really well because I really prioritized the nurturing of those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the other thing that I really got to do back then is really hone a skill. And because I worked in the music business, there was no instruction manual, so I had to like build the
Mm-hmm.
skill from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I basically what was called I was what was known as a product manager. And so when you're a product manager at Columbia Records in the 90s, you manage the product, which is the artist, and you feed your family on how low you keep the costs, sort of cost per record, and
Mm-hmm.
and so part of my days were like very fundamental marketing operation, and part of them were like chasing Nas around Queensbridge to make sure he didn't smoke too much weed last night. So it was a very interesting dynamic for a 25-year-old, young executive who moves from LA to New York to manage humans who are the product, who are the assets of our record label, um, and to also manage the product itself, like making them famous, and then manage my own career. So which lawyer I chose was really important because this
Mm.
lawyer also represented other people in the company's, executives. So like there's a lot of jockeying that I learned in the 90s.
Yeah.
I tell you that long-winded story for two reasons. One is that I arrived in the business that you had to have connections to get into, like, and I worked really hard to hone those relationships. Miss Dionne Warwick is my second mother. I had a lot of shooting pool at her house with interesting characters, and they gave me game. They helped me understand how to leverage Los Angeles, how to utilize the social capital in Black Hollywood, and then so when I moved to New York City and worked for Columbia Records, I kind of had some wiring on how the game is played.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that like gamesmanship, which was part of how you both got into the record business and how you kept a job in the record business served me well. And I thank those skills. I love that I was a mafia historian so that when I went into the record business, I understood the framework of the mafia and how that actually gave birth to the record business. So it gave me wiring to understand, where the record business comes from for you historians out there. That's where we get payola and where fingers get broken for records getting played on the radio.
Uh-oh.
That's a beautiful body of work that I like dropped out of college to go pursue. I was planning on going to law school. So all those skills I can document those skills. They're amazing. I know how I approach the job was different than the way that Anthony would approach the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
That leads me into today's layoffs. Um, who are you when your skills become an MD file? When I can take all of your skills and I can agentify them. I can take the way that you do the thing, because you repeat the same task every day, are now becoming AI agents.
Hmm.
And the corporations will be hiring you because you know how to manage an agentic workflow. You know how to manage digital employees. And the layoff that is coming, whatever we're calling the new layoff, will come. And there's sort of a saying that's been going around, sort of an AI for a while. You won't be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by someone who understands how to utilize AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so the layoff is coming to those that are not putting in the 10,000 hours to at least understand the new, I would say, the new industrial labor, right? Going to an office 9 to 5, retiring with a watch was the way that we grew up.
Yeah.
Those days are over. And
Mm-hmm.
so what you will now have is, I'm the best in the business, and I come with a orchestrator layer, and I know how to manage digital employees. And the layoff will come to those in two parts. I'm watching this right now very carefully. I have clients in enterprise. I have a client who's a CMO, top 100 CMO. And I'm watching the layoffs come for the people who make a lot of money. So your big earners, where I can take some of those skills and cut some costs. And then it's going to also come for those who are just not keeping up with the agentic era. I'll just leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the layoff won't be the layoff of the 90s. The layoff will feel different. It'll feel a lot different. And my argument, dare I say, my hypothesis, is around the skills and what you'll need in your backpack, the resilience to be either two things: an incredible cog in the wheel. I mean, it's sort of what education trains you to be, is a nice cog in a wheel and work for the man. It'll either do that, or it will make you an incredible entrepreneur. And my other part of that thesis is that some people are going to come to entrepreneurship kicking and screaming because they got laid off. Mm-hmm. And some are going to come prepared and ready. And so the getaway car that I talk about is designing your getaway vehicle. Now, you know how when you take a job, they used to say, design your exit now. You design your when you get the job day one, you design your exit. Well, my theory is actually when you get into a position, design your getaway vehicle and figure out what that looks like. And that's what we've been doing at my shop.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I mean, obviously, we can't talk all day because we have other things to do, but we probably could, right? One of the things you mentioned was more or less the 40-40 model, right? 40 hours a week for 40 years, gold watch, the pension. That's the paradigm that we grew up in. When we got out of school or when we started working, that's what it was. And so we went into corporate America, we went into the work world under one set of rules. And then while we were playing the game, the rules changed. It was a lot like, I don't know if you grew up playing baseball, where they said, when a team is losing, they call NBO, new batting order. And, you don't think it's fair because you're winning the way you were supposed to win. And now all of a sudden the game changes and you don't want to play anymore. Right. And so that's where we're at right now, is that we have a different set of rules, but we grew up, we took, 14, 16, 18, maybe even 20 years learning how to play this game this way. And a couple of years in, it's like, boom, nope, we changed the rules. And so we are going to have to adapt. Now, you mentioned, in the...
Can I comment on this is too good, Anthony, what you're talking about in terms of this. I just want to say one thing. I think it's really important to note that the rules that we were playing were based on European foundational models that actually never really serve people of color. And so, what I'm so fortunate and so grateful for is that I went into a corporation with innovators and dreamers from communities that look like Queensbridge, that look like Haiti, that look like different communities, right?
Yeah.
And what I learned, my foundation was so entrepreneurial. I always say that the first entrepreneurs that I ever worked with were hip hop artists because they didn't think like employees, they thought like partners. And so, what I think we're going to look like in the future is that what you will
Hmm.
do with your employer is you'll partner with them, you'll own your equity, you'll own your IP, and it'll feel like hip hop. It'll be like, yo, I'm Jermaine Dupri. I'm bringing this So Def catalog or this So Def roster to put out my records through this record label. And I think
Hmm.
because AI is collapsing time, because I can do more with more time, you may have that relationship with three or four different call them used to call them employers, now they're partners. And that's
Yeah.
what was going on in the record business. I might have Wyclef that's doing stuff with me with the Fugees, then he's over doing something in another record label. And that doesn't mean that he can't work with us. He can work with a lot of people because he understands how to use his time and his craft. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important to note that the rules are changing. However, the rules are going to look more like in for us, those of us that grew up in the Caribbean and Africa have roots to black and brown indigenous cultures. We are going to feel it's going to feel familiar because it's going to feel like community. It's going to feel like the values that probably your granddaddy and your auntie and the people that you grew up with probably they share. And I say this because I'm now outside of America and I'm
Yeah.
in Southeast Asia. I'm seeing community. I'm seeing entrepreneurs. I'm in a place which is very rural right now.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really interesting look back to look forward.
Yeah. And, growing up, we always hear you got to go to college, right? You got to go to school,
Yeah.
especially if you're in from certain backgrounds.
Yeah.
Now, would you say that dropping out of school helped you because you probably didn't have to unlearn as much as someone who maybe graduated college with a bachelor's or a master's? Do you think that that helped you along the way, not finishing college?
Yeah. Such a great question. By far for me, and I say this a lot to people, there's a context to this. If you're working in a job right now and you're not putting in hours on Clawbot or Claude or any of the LLMs, if you're in meetings all day and you're missing out, there's opportunity costs that come with you spending all day from 9 to 5, not staying up with the LLMs, right?
Hmm.
So I chased the same thing in 1993. I was like, there's opportunity costs. I can either be on this campus or miss this wave. And the
Hmm.
wave that I saw was hip hop in the 90s. And I could see in 1993, 94, living in Los Angeles, seeing the rise of, artists, Easy E, Snoop Dogg, what was happening on the West Coast, what was happening in the Bay Area. I could see that like there was a moment where I could either finish out college or jump on this train that
Hmm.
probably the window was going to open and I was going to probably have an opportunity. So yeah, for me, I think it served me really well. But I'll say this because I have two kids who are now college, one college graduate who've gone through college. So I've also had the perspective of being a parent with kids in college. And I will say for me, what I truly love is that sorry about that. What I truly love is that I have a spirit of learning. Like I actually am a lifelong learner. So when
Hmm.
I dropped out of UCLA, I promised my family I would treat the record business like academia. So like I studied the record business. I didn't just go into it. I could
Right.
tell you which mafia families controlled radio, publishing. I literally mapped two things, really well when I came out of college. My family ran with the Black Panther Party, so I understood networks and systems really well. And then I was a mafia historian. And so the thin line is networks and systems. And when
Hmm.
you understand networks and systems in any industry, it really helps you. But the music business, it gave me a foundation to understand the game and the rules. I would take that into advertising, venture capital, and the other careers I went into. But learning the game and then the railroad tracks, I would not have been able to learn that without like throwing myself into the business.
Yeah, it's funny because now trades have become more of an option. Not as many people are graduating high school and going into college. And before you would think maybe, well, they're just being lazy, they're just tired of school. But now it's, people are starting to question whether college is of value. Now, obviously, it's of some value. I mean, if I was graduating high school, I'd do it all over again the same way. But it's definitely not the option. Okay, it used to be the option, the only option. Now it's an option because people like yourself and people are going into trade schools. They're going into different forms of labor that don't require college, and some of them are having more success than people who are graduating college because we know all the stats about people graduating college and not even getting jobs in their own field. Some are not even getting jobs at all.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Anthony, and this is why I think this agentic era is so important. Like, I run circles around Harvard business graduates because I started running businesses that ran revenue, and I ran my artists like businesses. So there's no HBS class that could ever give you what I learned taking something from obscurity to fame and then managing all of the details. I mean, we shot a Fuji's video for $1.3 million, ready or not. Like, I'm dealing with like a $1.3 million, I'm 25, 26, $1.3 million budget on the video. Then I got to deal with this and I got to deal with advertising. And you literally were handed, like in venture capital, you have portfolio companies. Essentially, these artists were like portfolio companies. So I stand on that for a particular reason, because if you're out there listening right now and you're thinking about creating a t-shirt shop or a yogurt brand or a new modality for ADD, whatever your thing is, the ability to do that now because of AI has just gotten faster. So now you
Hmm.
can create, right? So when you can create, you're already an entrepreneur. And the
Right.
best way to learn how to run a business is run a business.
Hmm.
It's what I used to laugh about when I worked in venture capital, which was the next business I went into years after leaving the record business. Is most of the VCs that I would have meetings with, like, they actually never met payroll. Like, they never had to meet payroll. I'm like, bro, like, how are you advising these founders and you've never had to meet payroll? You've never had to
Hmm.
launch a product. You've never, like, you just know you came from Wall Street, or you came from like this cushy background. And
Yeah.
so I tended to have a little bit of chuckle a lot of times when I moved from the eventual place I would move into, which is venture capital. The last 10 years have been that. I'm like, bro, I'm talking to VCs who don't actually know the components of running a corner store. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm a bodega guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know how to
There you
move the
go.
SKU. You know what I mean? Like, I ran my businesses like bodegas, and most people that come out of Harvard Business School or some of these schools, they just don't have the real life experience of running this. And in the last part, I came up in hip hop, right? So
Hmm.
I'm dealing with the angel investors of hip hop, who are the street hustlers of that community. And so when you deal with those individuals, that you recognize the genius. Like, they might come from this block, but they literally are way more intelligent than some of the guys that I worked with in corporate. And I happen to have today some of my favorite humans right now are formerly incarcerated guys who served a lot of time. And literally, I represent, Kevin Garnett, a bunch of the ball players. And my greatest meetings are, Kevin Garnett on one end and formerly incarcerated on the other. And we're sitting and talking about, some stuff that you would never get. And Kevin Garnett dropped out of high school and went straight to the NBA. And, I'm in the same room with my man, Bo, who was the biggest drug dealer in Los Angeles. And it's the most
Hmm.
amazing conversations from two people that most people you would think, oh, they didn't have a degree. No, they know way more about anybody that I've
Yeah.
had any with. So yeah, it's been one of the hallmarks of my business lately.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned just Harvard and academia. It seems like it's so structured, and it's like the way to do things. I'm reading a book about negotiation. You probably heard of this guy, Chris Voss,
Know him
and
well. Exactly.
yeah, great guy.
Great guy. Great
I
guy.
mean, I've never met him, but I mean,
Yeah.
I love his videos. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
he talked about negotiation and just how these Harvard Business School guys had this way of negotiating, which is really a linear way of doing things,
Yeah.
and just having experience, dealing with hostages and tough situations, you learn how to maneuver. Kind of like
Yeah.
what you were saying before about business. It's like you have an idea of what to do, but a lot of stuff you have to figure out on the way. And when you're able to move and groove and think on your feet, it's a lot easy. It's a lot better than having a totally structured thing. Because what happens if they throw a monkey wrench into it? It's like, all right, you're stuck because you only know this one way to do things. And so, yeah, what you say has a lot of value. And now I know you said that you were not an expert on layoffs, but I mean, I think based on that article and based on what you've shared, I mean, you have experience, and that's where, the word expert comes. It comes from experience. So you definitely have experience in, layoffs and the dynamics and what goes on. Now, the let me go back to the article. Okay, I gave the title, and then it had a byline. It says, "The signals are already there. You're just not naming them." That hit me. I mean, I commented on your article. Um, what does that mean when you say this? Okay, you get laid off or you get fired, okay? But the signals are already there. So it's something that you probably could have seen coming or should have seen coming. But then it also says you're just not naming them. So what does that statement mean
Yeah.
for our
So
audience?
yeah, I want to be clear. I am not an expert in layoffs. I am probably a student of the future of work at best. I
Mm-hmm.
am a I am an analyst of how businesses will run in the future with
Mm-hmm.
technology and how AI will shape and change the way we run our businesses and the way we show up in humanity. So that article was written from that perspective, and the signals that I refer to in the article. And it's funny, the article was written like because this is how fast the world is moving. When I wrote that article, which was probably 2 months ago, I guess 3 months. I don't even know.
Yeah.
It feels like 2 or 3 months old though. Um, it was at the beginning of what I think we're in right now, which is when I wrote that, agentic AI wasn't even where it is now. Like it's funny because like I always say, the AI of October of last year is totally different than the AI now. And so when I think about when you read my stuff, it's usually of the moment. And so that in that moment, I was kind of, if I can use my friend, I have a friend who has a whole theory about being a canary in a coal mine. I was kind of whistling to the other canaries that this is coming, and you're not even going to recognize that it's coming. And I happen to
Mm.
be advising a C-suite executive at a company, and we were building a digital twin around her job. And the signal was pretty clear that the more you talk on your corporate Zoom, the more you run emails on your Microsoft SharePoint, the more you sit in meetings and give your boss PowerPoints, you're actually giving away your IP. You're actually giving away your unique point of view, and you get to make a decision whether that is the life that you want to create, because you actually don't. When you're employed by somebody, they actually own all of the works. You probably don't read that in the fine line, but when you create things working for a company, you're actually it's actually the property of the company. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say to anyone, what you probably have given very little thought to is that those ideas are IP. Those ideas are your unique way of looking at the job. They hired you, you took the job, and you took your set of experiences coming from, uptown, downtown, East Coast, West Coast, Harvard, Morehouse, wherever you come from.
Yeah.
You bring that into the job, and then that's the differentiation between you and someone else. And those unique ideas that you put in a meeting, a creative meeting, um, will end up being the property of that company, and you get to make a decision in this new economy whether those ideas are meant to be for you or whether they're meant to be for your employer.
Hmm.
And that was pretty clear as we were advising this C-suite executive. I run my own business. I haven't worked inside of a corporation. They probably have a hard time with me now because I'd be like, I'm not giving you any ideas. But I did run an agency for a long time.
Uh-huh.
I worked at Omnicom, After the music business, I built an agency and I worked with Nike, Beats by Dre, a bunch of big brands. And I think about all the PowerPoints that I created with the dopest ideas that just they're probably sitting in someone's Dropbox right now,
Hmm.
and that's IP. Those are incredible ideas. I actually now, as a part of what we build what are called vaults. So I've taken all of the really good ideas I've had over my career and I've built an entire vault. And the AI references it when I need ideas. They're like, oh, remember, you had that idea. So those ideas are your imagination, and that's the thing that AI will never replicate. And so I
Hmm.
think the signal that I'm referring to is the one that says that we've worked for these corporations for a long time. We've given the best of our time, the best of our ideas, and you get to make the decision now in this new economy whether those ideas are best served in your own personalized LLM or are they best served on your Microsoft SharePoint at your employer's office.
Hmm. Great stuff. When I was thinking of signs, I was thinking of a situation I was in. I left the job because of the toxicity, so I didn't get laid off. However, I thought that there was parallels there because um, there are some things that you see, like you have intuition. Everybody has intuition, and there are some things that you see that you recognize and you act on them. There's some that you see but you don't. You know, you kind of will your way through what's happening is not really happening, and then afterwards you realize, oh man, I did see that, but I
Yeah,
denied it. I saw that, but I
chose the
didn't
role.
act
Yeah,
on it. I
yeah,
chose it because I need a job. I need to.
yeah,
They pay me too well here, so you end up compromising,
yeah.
and then in the end, you feel like this should not have happened, or I should have been ready for it.
Yeah, that's happened to me. That compromising part is so damaging for your body.
Yeah.
I've had positions where well, I've had one maybe. I didn't do this a lot. I can remember one to maybe two positions where I felt like I wasn't showing up as authentic and I compromised and I did things for the check. They never worked out. And I've been an entrepreneur for a long time now. I haven't necessarily held a job, work for someone, but that is the thing that I hold as an entrepreneur is like I just have integrity. Like I have integrity around what I'm going to work on, what I'm going to do. And when you work inside of a job or a corporation, you're asked to stretch sometimes what you truly believe in or what for the sake of the company. And that's hard. That's really hard. And I think again, one of the other things why I'm so bullish on the creation of your own things. And even if you're inside of an organization, being an entrepreneur, I mean, you don't have to necessarily go out and file, an LLC and set up a corporation in Delaware. I think this idea of entrepreneurial thinking is going to be really important. I think that's what's also going to keep you employed. I think organizations are going to be looking for people that think differently. The thing I love about the work I do in AI is I actually get clients to think differently. It's not you prompt differently. I get you to
Mm-hmm.
even think about where you're storing your data or how you like engage with, your day, right? I actually have a thing where I meditate and journal every day. I use AI. I don't
Good.
start my day until the AI file that has all of my kind of where my emotions are triggers my calendar and my to-do list, and that triggers the rest of my day. I build my day around actually where I am because I've actually built an entire framework using AI agents to like meet me where I am, and some
Mm-hmm.
days I need play, some days I need rest, some days I need, to work later at night, and I don't think I had that kind of management of my energy when I just work.
Yeah.
And I really believe now in the monitoring of your self, your quantified self, whatever. You got an aura ring. What are you doing with that data? If you got, a Nike fuel band, well, then park down the street and get 10,000 in for lunch.
Yeah.
I learned that during the pandemic, I did a lot of my calls walking around my community for all day. I would just walk. I lived in LA and lived on the beach, and it was a blessing because I got to like use the whole beach as my office. And I would just walk from the Palisades to Santa Monica. So
Mm.
I think, I changed a lot of things during the pandemic. I got to review a lot of things of how I used to work. And I would say that like there's new terms for you, there's new rules. I think that's the beginning of our conversation was so important. It
Yeah.
made me realize that we come out of these universities, we come out of these academic institutions, we go into these corporations, and we're handed a set of doctrine of how you're supposed to
Hmm.
operate. And hopefully, this new era gets us to challenge that.
Definitely. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast. Anthony Quinones is your host, and four-time reinventor and founder of Authenticated Ventures, James Andrews, is my guest.
Or time. That sounds like those are medals, man. Reinvention medals.
You're the man. And so you've done this four times, as we've stated. You've
Yeah,
bounced around. When did you start, and what inspired you to become an early adapter? Because that's a risky thing. Not everybody is wired for that, because
yeah,
obviously there's risk, and not everybody is designed or prepared
yeah.
to handle that. So how did that happen?
Yeah. Well, words matter. I don't think I was bouncing around anywhere. Everything was done with great intention.
Well, yeah, that's,
Everything.
I didn't mean it like that. I'm
No,
sorry. Yeah.
words matter. I'm a big words matter person.
Oh, they
So,
do.
so, yeah, everything wasn't bouncing. It was literally very strategic. So I think I learned this. Um, you know, grateful to grow up in both the East Bay of the Bay Area and the South Bay. So Oakland, Alameda, Berkeley. Then I went to high school in Palo Alto. Very different communities. I grew up in the eye of Silicon Valley. I saw the birth of the internet on Stanford's campus. And I went to Palo Alto High School, which was a really dynamic high school, sitting pretty much in the shadow of Stanford University. And so I spent a lot of time both understanding, tenacity and resilience, being from Oakland and Alameda and Berkeley, then going to another side of the Bay Area and being with some of the brightest minds. And I think for me, man, I didn't graduate with a high GPA. I had a 2.1. There was a bunch of people in my high school that barely thought I would make it, and I just took a shot, got my grades up, and thought I was a basketball player. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I would just walk on to this college program, and so I took myself to Utah, which I went to Provo, Utah. Not a lot of African Americans in Provo. I was one of eight. And it was just a risk, man. It was 1988, and all my Mormon friends were like, "You should come to college with us." And I was like, "All right, cool." And I think it began a life of like intentionally doing things that shock me, like doing things that are like a bit of a shock to the system. And Provo, Utah was a shock to the system at first. It was very different. But it really, I grew and I ended up not playing basketball. Another basketball coach took pity on me in Ventura, which is in California. And I was in the program, got my GPA up, and lived part of my life with like hoop dream guys, like dudes from the inner city who wanted to
Hmm.
go to the NBA. And then I would like on weekends go to Beverly Hills, and that's where I would spend time with Miss Dionne Warwick and her son. And I learned about the record business. So I had this like these two dichotomy worlds. Like I would go to Ventura with homeboys from Compton, and then I was in Beverly Hills with Luther Vandross. I met Sammy Davis Jr. I met Whitney Houston, Miss Dion's niece, and my first tour was Whitney Houston. And so I've always had these like dichotomy, like different worlds I've lived in. It's very natural for me to live in parallel worlds and identities. And so I think it feels really good. I'm also like a lifelong learner. So when I got to the highest point of the record business and we were crushing it, there was an uneasiness. There was like there's like a restlessness. Like, "Ah, this ain't it. This ain't the only thing." And I was
Hmm.
like, you can't really like, for some reason, I felt like being a music marketing person wasn't going to be the best use of my skills at that point. And because I'd gone to Palo Alto High School, I saw the birth of the internet. I could see in 1996, 97, 98 that it was coming. And so I
Hmm.
left and went into the .com space with a small stint as CMO at Echo Unlimited. I worked for Mark Echo and worked on the Echo brand. But even then, I did some like non-traditional stuff. It was just out of the box stuff, and I got really in my out of the box bag. And I think when you come from the record business, you're challenged to think differently. You're challenged to
Hmm.
like really dream and imagine because your product is Wyclef Jean and Lauryn Hill. And so they're challenging the norms and want to change the world with a microphone. So it challenges you as a marketer to like not give a basic marketing plan. So it's almost like I used to call it being an artist trapped in a business person's body. I used to think like an artist because that's how I wrote business plans. That's how I wrote marketing plans. So I think that adaptability, that seeing around the cornerness, gave me the ability to think about pivots a lot easier. And I think the last piece is just being a student. Even when I went
Mm-hmm.
into advertising, I was like, I went to work for Omnicom, big agency, big global agency, and I like studied the agency world. I'd come from the record business, come from fashion, come from .com. And I was like, I'm going to learn everything about the agency world. And I did. I learned what an RFI is, an RFP, and how, we pitched Nike and General Mills and all these big brands. I worked in the Coca-Cola building for an agency that I worked for and learned the Coca-Cola system. But I think the thin line that runs through it is I'm just a curious dude. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you throw me in the Coke building, I'm going to figure out, like, tell me how the syrup was invented. What's the process of the bottlers? How does money flow? You put me in any environment, I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah, and you talked about the mafia earlier, so definitely being a mafia historian, that's
Absolutely.
curiosity. Maybe you should give us some of the names so I can put them in the show notes. No, I'm only kidding. Um,
Yeah.
but listen, you reinvented yourself and you went into Columbia Records and had a lot of success. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of us who have reinvented ourselves successfully. But let me ask you this question because you've gone on to reinvent yourself a few more times. How do you know when to get out? How do you know when to reinvent yourself again? Because reinvention is hard to do one time. And usually, if you do it one time successfully, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to stay here because I have, proof of concept, I have, you know, accolades, successes. But sometimes you got to move on. Like companies sometimes don't move on and they get crushed. So, how do you know when to move out of maybe even a great situation to go to another situation?
I can only speak for me, and I think this, I'd say my community, the people that I admire, the executives that kind of run in my circle, we probably share something very similar, is that um, you pay attention when you work in culture. Culture is really paying attention. So I worked in a world where I had to know all the things that were going on. And I think the early signal for me in the record business was being a kid from Palo Alto who was utilizing Napster at night in 97, utilizing LimeWire, moving files around, right? While I'm
Mm-hmm.
going into my office selling a plastic disc. And when I would like bring this up in meetings, I'd almost get laughed out of meetings. I was like, yo, there's this thing called the internet, and our artists should have websites. And my bosses were like, just get to work, do this. I was like, worry about radio play. And I was like, no, my artists need to have websites. And so I realized when I was facing so much opposition and it just didn't feel good, and I knew I was onto something, I knew it was time for me to like find another environment. And at that point, man, I made a lot of money. I had a lot of success at Columbia Records, and it just started to feel like it wasn't built and designed for the next decade. And I like to think in decades.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit of a futurist, and I like to look at where the business or the client or the moment is and zoom out a little bit. And so, I think the ability to move into different industries also is exciting. Like I love that I've been able to like move skill sets. When I went into venture capital, it just felt like the record business again. I was like, you're betting on a person. That person has a community. That person has a unique IP and idea they want to change the world with. Well, that's what Nas did. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
it was the same thing, And so I joined forces with a guy named Troy Carter, and he was my partner, and he managed Lady Gaga. And we both came from the same streets, and we both kind of aligned to say, hey, the same way we broke artists, let's do that in venture capital. And so the skill set was able to translate. And I think that's a hallmark as well, as like understanding which of your skills actually can move through the future. And I think in this era of AI, again, when your skills can become an MD file, this is not going to make sense to some people who are listening, but an
Mm-hmm.
MD file is essentially the output that comes out of like Claude, and it allows the file to talk to the LLM, to talk to your chat, right? And you're going to start to see this more and more. You're going to take your skills. Like I have a head of PR a head of marketing, a head of sales that are built on skills. When I can take your entire skills and put them in an MD file, what does that really mean? And how and so I think what I've been really good at is finding those skills that are not they're unique. They're
Mm-hmm.
unique skills that come from my background, my experience. So, right now I'm getting a lot of experience in understanding Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. So I've been gone for a year studying those things because I now have, some expertise in something that takes what you know me for, but gives me it's like it's like when you go back to college. I just went back to college and got my degree in Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia because I've
Mm-hmm.
lived in these places now 4 months each,
Yeah.
and done business there. And so it's I knew that there was something more that I wanted to do with my skills, and I knew I wanted to find a unique proposition or unique difference or selling difference in building my own brand. But even beyond building my own brand, because for me at this point in my career, I'm not building my brand for any audience but one, but God. Like I don't really I'm not doing this for social media. Like this is for me my relationship with myself and being able to wake up every morning and be like, this is how I want to feel. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to live. This is how I want to live. This is the type of people I want to be around. And I sit here and just believe that, we all have that opportunity to choose the environments and not let it choose us.
Yeah.
And I had my mom was in a job for years that I knew she hated. And it was painful to watch your mom come home as a latchkey kid, single mother, and
Yeah.
have someone complain about their job every day. And I think I made a bet early in my life, like, you know what, bro? I'm not going to be the one to come home, complain about my job every day. If I can't do what I do that I love, I love the Allen Iverson for the job I love. We're talking about practice, not a game, not a game. We're
Not a
talking about
game.
practice,
Yeah.
not the game I love. You know what I mean? Like that's how I feel. But a lot of athletes are my clients and friends, and they love the game. You know what I'm saying? Like when I worked at Columbia Records, they paid me a lot of money, but I love the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Put me in New York City doing the things I forgot. I mean, they pay me, but they could have paid me nothing because I was like the game in and of itself was so exciting, and it feels that way now. There's bigger stakes. I got other responsibilities, but I still carry that at 56 years old. I still carry that
Mm-hmm.
love of the game. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And happy belated birthday. I know you celebrated a birthday recently.
Yeah,
It's
thank
funny
you.
you mentioned AI because, 30 years ago, AI was the abbreviation for Allen Iverson. So you're talking about, the
Love that you put
game
that. Yeah.
practice and
Yeah.
the game, not a game.
Not a game.
That quote will live forever. I mean,
That's
that
right.
is one of the funniest quotes ever.
Yep.
So, you talked about curiosity at first, earlier, intuition, when you're talking about just now, knowing when to get in and knowing when to get out,
Sure.
are very important qualities. And you talked about skill sets earlier and now recently. So, for our audience who want to be like you, okay, who want to reinvent themselves successfully, talk about skills for a little bit. Like how important skills. So I know you talked about how you don't want your skills to be in a file where it can be, commoditized. What are some skills that people who want to reinvent themselves need to tap into?
Reinvention and pivoting
Yeah.
requires a strong sense of your nervous system.
Hmm.
And here's why. Um, you've been you've been identified and known for a thing. Your family knows you by it.
Mm-hmm.
Your industry knows you by it. Um, and now you want to go and do something new where you don't know the kids at the lunch table. Um, you don't know the nomenclature and the words they use. Um, and but you were good at something, right? You were really good at this thing,
Yeah.
and now you're deciding to go into something that requires that you're starting from zero. And if you're a kid, it's one thing, right? We have that resilience kind of start over thing. When you get older, it's a muscle that you don't really use all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so I use the word nervous system work because it's generally identity. You have like locked into this identity. I remember when I left the big corporate record business job and I was like, oh, no one's going to return my phone call. And, and who's, it was an amazing journey of like leaving the big, brand and having to do it on my own. But I grew such a confidence in my own ability
Mm-hmm.
um, that it strengthened my nervous system in a way that I feel like it helped the rest of the pivots. I went into my fourth pivot was venture capital. I don't have a finance degree. Um, I didn't necessarily have millions of dollars, um, and I went into a world that is intentionally made to look like challenging or hard to get into, or like it's not for you, or there's not a lot of people that look like you in our world, right? Like, oh, where do you come from, or what's your background? And
Yeah.
by my fourth career pivot, I had the confidence, the nervous system to be able to joust with you, young lad from Stanford, or whoever. I had
Yeah.
the confidence to intellectually joust with those who would poke around and be like, I'm trying to figure you out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people cave in those situations because they don't have the background or the language. I was just honest. Like I put myself in a very much a learning position. Like I'm here to learn. I don't really understand everything, and I'm here to teach. So I got into venture capital because I used to bring VCs to Atlanta where I lived to meet with my friends Jermaine Dupree and Usher and all these guys because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn with them, and so I'd bring VCs to Atlanta and we'd ask, "What's Series A? What's diluted stock? What's a board seat mean?" So I built like my own little camp, in Atlanta
Mm-hmm.
with high net worth Black folks who I knew would only feel safe to ask those kinds of questions in a closed door environment.
Uh-huh.
And I built some really beautiful experiences in Atlanta, leveraged the city of Atlanta as my backdrop, and got to be a student again.
Mm-hmm.
And that really led me to really understanding my fourth career, which is venture capital. And I got to spend the last 8 to 10 years in that world, and it's been amazing. But it really required me to be, to be messy, to
Mm-hmm.
to kind of not know it all and be okay with that, and to be okay um, starting from zero. And mind you, I was on the cover of the Wall Street Journal when I did the .com thing. I used to appear on Don Lemon show on CNN. Like I was a
Oh
regular on
yeah.
Don Lemon. Like I had done all the things, and here I was starting over, in LA, working with my partner who had a big name. I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
second to him. He managed Lady Gaga. He was a shark on Shark Tank,
Yeah.
and I really, was like, I don't know as much as he did. We invested in Uber, Spotify, Lyft, Warby Parker. We had 100 deals in our portfolio, and I, was like, hey, I want to learn from you. So I
Mm-hmm.
moved my entire family from Atlanta to LA to start over. And I was 50, I was 51, probably 50 at that point. And I think when you get those moments to both learn, try something new, and there's a thing about Silicon Valley that I learned. It actually celebrates failure. So it's this thing
Mm-hmm.
of not being afraid to fail, to actually embrace, to actually create containers. That's the beauty of Silicon Valley is they create these containers where failure is celebrated, right? But we come from communities
Yeah.
where that doesn't happen. So you have to like
Right.
fight the voices. And so your nervous system has to be able to withstand mama and them, community and them, maybe your wife and
Uh-huh.
them, who might
And
look
them,
at
yeah.
you, who might look at you like, well, but what you were 20 years at that company, or you've been doing this for 30 years. And
Uh-huh.
I think, those of us that have the bravery to do it, we've done it, and I count myself among some great people who I've watched through this. I think my
Mm-hmm.
specialty is really less people who've gotten laid off, but more people who have to pivot. And that's why I work with Kevin Garnett, who's known for basketball, but like, now is a podcaster, right? Or I know
Yeah.
Michael Johnson, who won all these awards, all these medals in the Olympics, and now he's doing a startup, or my man J.R. Ryder, who I played the league baseball with, who's,
Okay.
in Phoenix, Arizona right now coaching, you know what I'm saying? Or Kenny Lattimore, who's my artist at Sony, or he and his wife are now embarking on a new thing, or Jazzy Jeff, who had to actually reinvent himself during the pandemic because he almost died of COVID and
Mm.
now had to live stream his DJ sets, so or Jane Fonda, who was my client in Atlanta, who at 72 found me, and she became my first client in my agency. And I taught her how to
How about
use
that?
Twitter and a blog and built janefonda.com and, put her in the internet. And so I keep meeting these people who they also are showing me their vulnerabilities in their pivots. And
Hmm.
so I think I stand on the shoulders of great pivoters as a pivoter myself.
Yeah, you shared a lot about pivoting there, a lot of great stuff, especially the beginning when you talked about the mindset, really talking about the nervous system, just all the stuff that happens within you. All the nervousness. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? The people that are around you telling you why you're doing that. It's like you're dead set on doing this thing because you believe it. But everything around you is telling you no, you shouldn't because, I mean, you're successful now. I mean, why would you want to change now? But one thing you
Yeah.
mentioned, a few minutes ago was just about intuition. Intuition is a really big thing because you got to know when to move and where to move and how to move. And sometimes intuition tells us what to do, but we don't allow it to work. And then also fear of failure. We definitely fear failure a lot of times, which keeps us back. One of the main things that I really believe in what you said was talking about your past and how we have everybody, I don't care who you are, you have past victories. Anything that you want to do, you've done an aspect of it in your past life. I think of an example of, David and Goliath, just how David never killed a soldier or anybody, but he protected his sheep. So when he thought about, okay, well, I can kill this guy because I've done this sort of work in a different way. And so we all have past victories that we can, you know, you know, go back to, cling to, and sometimes those are the things that help us to move forward and open doors into this future reinvention that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So I know we can go on. I'm sorry, you had something you want to add?
Oh, I have a lot to say. I want to be cognizant of the time, but I
Yeah.
think, the one thing I'll add to that, which is beautiful, this idea of doing an inventory of the victories, of the wins. And I just want to add to that kind of a continuation of what I was just saying. Also an inventory of like the times you tried it, it didn't work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and actually sometimes it's not meant for the time. So the idea
Yeah.
was too early, and so I was just doing that before we jumped on this interview. I had a bunch of projects I'd worked on in the pandemic that I went back and revisited, and I went, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was talking about. Is so relevant right now. And this is from
Mm-hmm.
2021. And so either I launched it or didn't launch it or tried to do it. And I really believe that like the ideas are meant to germinate and blossom at a mixture of timing. And I will say something about intuition. Sometimes intuition is not even like telling me what to do, but rather that it's just move. It might
Mm-hmm.
just be like not here, not right now. And then I would say that's been the theme of my year. Um, is it just move. It's time to go. And I don't know why I did that. I was in Dubai December, January. I have been spending most of my time in the UAE, and I would say February, I got the call, move, like you got to
Mm.
go. So I came to Southeast Asia, and 3 weeks late, 3 weeks later, then the war broke out. My stuff is still in
Wow.
Dubai, and it's been being open to not having all the answers all the time, and just
Mm-hmm.
hearing the one word move sometimes is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you say, we always say that success leaves clues.
Mm.
So does failure.
Yeah.
I can kind of relate. Because I'm a big idea guy. And
Yeah.
I know there have been times when I've been a bit early. There's sometimes when I haven't gone in all the way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you look back and it's like, dag, if this, then,
Yeah.
so yeah, we all have those stories. But
Right.
as you said, we got to move. Okay, we can't just stay in the same spot. So I got a
Yeah.
couple more questions before we go.
Sounds good.
Definitely appreciate the time. You and I are about the same age, so we definitely know the rules that we played when we were younger. We know what the rules are now, so we can definitely relate to a lot of different things. So, for those of us who are looking to reinvent ourselves, and the title of my podcast is Create Your New Normal, what are some other advice, besides the great advice you've already given, what are some other advice that you want to give to people who are looking to create their new normal?
I love the title of your show, um,
Thank you.
because it is, for me, the new normal is and should be, or could be, um, the new normal of how you want to see yourself,
Hmm.
see your entire life, see your relationships, see your money, see your how you show up. And I think the new normal is giving yourself a regular um, moment to reflect on that. Um, and the new normal, I hope, will be not the old. Um, like I truly believe on this idea, and it was what we talked about earlier. It's in the article of having a getaway vehicle. The getaway vehicle should be your safety. The way that we are going to view work in the future is going to change.
Yeah.
um, Menial jobs are not going to be there. So I think it's really important for those of you who have not gone down and started to do the research on where this is all going. But like the way we even work or even show up for labor um, is going to change. And that's just the reality. That's why I wrote the article. What's behind that is a lot of thoughts around the future of work and labor and the roles in which the things that that used to take up a lot of time are now collapsed. And
Hmm.
so my contemplation that I started off with a few years ago was, if I gave you back time, what would you do with it? Like, what would you do with this
Hmm.
newfound time? And you're going to have that. I do work now that would take me 3 weeks in like 30 minutes, um, and I'm running an agentic business where like the
Right.
agents are working all day, all night, and I'm able to do other things. And I think for you, in this position, if you're listening, like, what do you do with that time? If you have that time, and do you use it to have your own academic work? Like, as you can tell, like I've gone to my own schools. I built my own courses basically. Um, and I think part of staying fresh and keeping your mind fresh is finding, you know, following those threads. Following, there's a reason why, sometimes I just study certain things, and the power of AI, I can study things just on the bus, on the subway, right? I can like
Right.
take an idea. How come they don't sell, quarter water in these stores? Or how come, and you can actually, work out an idea on the train. And I think
Yeah.
that, and the point I'm trying to make is like how you arrive at ideas, how you think is going to be so important. It's going to be what you do get a new job on or what you start your new business on. It's going to be how you think, how you approach the query. Um, and I think that like if I were in a situation where I was going to pivot from somewhere, one of the things I would really embrace is like thinking differently, being
Hmm.
open to different channels, being open to different references, um, challenging your mind. I mean, there's a reason that older people do crossword puzzles because it stimulates them. There's a reason
Yep.
that, you shouldn't use Waze all the time because you want to actually work a part of your brain that actually has to do that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of, for me, if you're not using AI yet at a level where it's challenging you, you may want to think about ways in which it can challenge you. I purposely have certain agents that challenge my thinking because I take my thinking to the gym. I want to
Hmm.
think differently. And I do believe in this last piece, which I think is going to be the part that is the most important thing for humanity, is the imagination. And I
Hmm.
truly believe in the imagination and the cultivation of the imagination, so much so that I actually have time that I take away to practice what I call kairos. The Greeks used to measure time two ways. One is chronos, where we
Yeah.
get the word chronology, and the second is kairos. And kairos is a spiritual time. It's a time you
Hmm.
can't measure with a clock. It's an opportune moment. And when you ask me about
Right.
those, what you were referring to as intuition, I generally look at it through this lens of kairos, and I can see kairotic moments.
Hmm.
And the thing I learned during the pandemic, and I used to do a show on Clubhouse about this actually, is how to kind of live kairotically. Children are the ones who live most kairotically. They have no sense of time, they just play, and they just have joy. And so I actually built in my schedule kairotic moments. So I'll just go play. I think play is really important for my skill set. So I'll just go play. And play for me might be working on something. Doesn't mean like being silly all the time. Play could be, world building. I do a lot of world building. I'm also DJing.
Yeah.
I've been DJing for a decade. I also
Yep.
make music. I find records. I think those things will be really important. I do believe that the imagination is going to be an asset for those of us, and I think that Black and Brown folks have the most amazing imaginations, and I think we need to always cultivate those.
Yeah. James Andrews, also Rich Cacao.
Rich Cacao, DJ Rich
Yep.
Cacao. I work for Hips Not
That
Tips, baby.
that's the
Valiamos,
DJ.
valiamos,
Yes,
valiamos.
sir. So, one more question before we go.
Yeah,
Great stuff, by the way. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to listen to this and post this, publish this podcast so I can listen back again. Not to hear me, but to hear you.
yeah,
um, in this article that you wrote, it was a great article. And you also did something called the April Reset. So this article was written, I guess, at the end of March, and
yeah,
you were promoting this April Reset that
yeah.
you were talking about, and really challenging people, to get this, in 30 days to make something happen. Why don't you tell our audience about what that was and how that went?
Yeah, again, one of the things in a very stressful time of the pandemic, I had the good fortune of having a lot of followers on Clubhouse. I had 2.5 million followers. So I
Mm-hmm.
was always doing these sort of these experiments where I just take people off. We had a lot of time then. So I do these like all day kind of like 9 to 5 kind of retreats, virtual retreats. I did dinners during the pandemic virtually. I hosted a lot of conversations, and so this was sort of a throwback to something I did called the Resilient Creator, where we kind of from 9 to kind of midnight, we kind of unpacked resilience as an important muscle. And so I realized that I could see down the street that coming into April we would go into massive job layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to create like sort of like a cohort of people that would take the journey with me, learn about kind of what I was seeing in the job market, learn at the same time learn how to make a digital twin, learn how to build your own getaway vehicle, which I think is really important for people to have all their skills and all of their like your unique portfolio. So I taught people how to do that, and we just use April to just help people um, think differently about what reset means.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity for I have a community in WhatsApp that I've been running for 4 years. We have
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of people in our WhatsApp community. I got kind of weirded out by having a lot of followers on Clubhouse, and I wanted to do something that was more closed, kind of intimate. So I built about 8 different WhatsApp groups that range from AI to Middle East to venture capital, and so I kind of offered this to all of those groups, and yeah, it's something that I like to do often. It's just gather people
Right.
to everyone's on some. When you have people that all have an aligned mission and aligned purpose, a lot of incredible things can happen.
Great. So we learned a lot about you. We learned a lot about reinvention, the skills. I mean, like I said, we can go on and on. But the one thing we all got to get is that getaway vehicle, right? No matter who you are, we've got to be able to get away when the time comes. So I definitely
That's right.
appreciate that. Appreciate the time. This has been a long time in the making, but
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. It's great learning about you, your career, your pivots, and just a lot of the great advice that you shared with our audience. I really, really appreciate it. So, before we close, how can our audience find out about you and what you're working on?
Well, yeah, I blog weekly on Substack, at least 2 or 3 times a week now. Shout out to the Knicks. I just wrote a great piece about my friend Worldwide West, who
Yes.
is the secret power behind the Knicks. Hope you guys can pull it out. I'm a Knicks fan from afar, even though I lived in New York and New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
So I have some familiarity with going to Knicks games, but I have a lot of love for New York City, and I hope you guys pull it out. And I think sports is such an amazing thing. It's great to be outside of America, feeling this, feeling the New York Cityness.
Oh,
So there's that. You can go there and read articles, there all the time. Um, Instagram is a part of what I do. I guess it's not not the main thing. And then we're doing courses and trainings and all kinds of things that you can find. There's a Day One Labs I'm associated with, which is with building agentic systems, and I'm associated with those guys. And there's a book that's coming that I've written that I'm really excited about, and maybe I'll come back on and talk about it. But it's
sure.
really about the power of reinvention, and the tools I think that and the skill sets I think you'll need for the next generation. So yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm on Substack. Sole Purpose is my Substack. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Key Influencer on LinkedIn. I'm Key Influencer on Instagram. And those are the main places where I kind of talk. And then there's some private networks that I curate for some of our community members.
All right, terrific. Well, that's a perfect name for you, key influencer. You have influenced a lot of people over the years, and I know that you will influence, well, you have influenced our guests, I mean, our listeners, and people who are watching this on YouTube. So, again, thank you very much for your time, your advice, your life, and I look forward to seeing you reinvent yourself in the future successfully.
Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it, Anthony.
All right, you got it. That's James Andrews, founder of Authenticated Ventures and four-time reinventor. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Create Your New Normal. And don't just listen. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review this show at Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. And for more information on how you can create your new normal, visit createyournewnormal.com to learn how to reinvent yourself on your terms, not someone else's. That's createyournewnormal.com. Well, that's all for now. And until next time, I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, inspiring you to create your new normal. Take care and God bless.